We don't need
write an episode name for this one.
Yeah, and that's how we're starting. That's how we're starting the episode.
That's in post.
I don't know what you're talking about. This is live.
Wait,
hey,
we don't
casual
have
experts.
I don't have the list. I don't remember. I remember this. This is all I remember.
Oh yeah, that's a thing we'll talk about. But I'm not throwing graphics together. That turned out to be really bad, really time consuming in the program that I found. So we're not going to do that. Let's see. I know I've got the actual list saved, but why don't we just move on to introductions like we forgot to do last time? So, Casual Experts, episode 2. I'm one of your hosts, Alec, and joined by my fellow host.
Hi, I'm Lucas.
Everyone seems to recognize you.
I get out there and then I don't leave my house. So, makes sense.
It's a dream. It's a dream.
I'm actually in a coma. That's why everyone knows me. You're all figments of my imagination.
No, we're all Ben. We've already discussed this. We're all Ben. Which is
true.
Coincidental because Ben ended up not deciding to join us for this episode.
Yeah, we're gonna have our straight man Ben be in the podcast today to keep us in check and give some insight. But he was not able to make it today. So today we'll be discussing some mechanics. That includes things like keywords, summonings, stuff like that.
What makes the difference between most of the games that we know particularly well, some of the games that we don't know as well, but mainly just what things are the same between them, what things are different. Actually trying to anchor that down a bit more. Pet decks. Everyone's got to have a pet deck. Skull Servants, Burn, Shoal and Tell, because you've got Progenitus, Delver, Infect.
Why are you listing all mine first? I feel offended.
Because I'm the one talking. I'd rather feel inclusive.
How dare you?
Go right to hell for your inclusivity. Why they're enjoyable, how they function, and what's alluring to them.
Function like shit.
You say that, but you win. Not wrong.
Depends on the deck.
And we'll do a bit more analysis with a board game that I haven't gotten to play much, but I've gotten to hear about weird things that have happened due to how you guys played it, and got to see some of the cool lines of play that you can do with it, and that is Love Letter. Right.
Fantastic game.
It is really fun, and it's really simple, and that's really what it comes down to. You find a simple game, you make just enough rules for it to function, and you try and find ways where tricky things can be done.
I mean, we just use the basic rules, like basic bitches, but it's really fun. It's super simple.
Yes, it is.
So anyways, we'll move to our first topic of mechanics.
Alright, so mechanics, keywords, summonings. We'll start with Magic because that's what we're currently involved most in.
Magic the Gathering, for all those you wondering at home.
Not the masterful craft of prestidigitation, unfortunately. So, keywords. Everyone's favorite, because they are something that fundamentally is on every card that you want to play. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. It's the most cohesive element of Magic the Gathering outside of the types and outside of mana costs. It's one of the first things that you will recognize on a card once you move past those. So, keywords. Let's start with the simplest of them. Things like...
I think a good way to describe keywords is one of the most effective yet simplistic things a card can have that is not necessarily unique to it.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a unique effect, I should say.
You can build an entire deck around it, and it's fun, and it's simple.
Odric is an asshole, by the way. If it, I don't remember the full card title.
Basically, once you enter combat, for every keyword that's on a single creature, all creatures during that combat get it.
All of your creatures gain all those keywords, which, once you learn some of the keywords, it can get ridiculous very quickly.
Oh, it's fun. Double Strike Trampling is fantastic.
That's Death Touch Trample.
And Death Touch Trample is also good.
So let's just start with some of the basics.
How about this? Let's start with what we just talked about.
Okay.
We've got Trample. Trample is a very fun mechanic. It's very simple. It is what green decks that just want to overrun people love to do to finish off the game. Basically, Trample says you trample over them and continue to hurt the person after they block.
So essentially how it works in combat, you have your creatures, you declare your attacks, any interactions can go on after you declare attackers, then the person you're attacking, you declare an attack at a specific player, you can't direct it at creatures, such as in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to destroy all the players on your opponent's field before you can attack them directly, can't do that, and then your opponent gets to choose blocks. So they're going to block most optimally, killing as many of your creatures as they can and saving as many of theirs, most likely.
Or throwing a creature under the bus for the greater good of saving their life.
Yes.
Chump blocking.
So damage is assigned to creatures. So if you don't block it, it's going to deal damage to you. If it doesn't have... So we're going to get into Trample. Every creature is a power and a toughness. And when you pit two creatures against each other, they deal their power to each other, and the power is dealt in damage to their toughness. If a creature has a higher power, if a creature is dealt damage equal to or more than their toughness, they are dead.
Yep. It's lethal.
It's lethal to that creature. So how Trample works is if a creature is attacking, say you have a 10 power, the toughness doesn't matter since it's attacking at this point.
Why don't we use Galta? We'll use Standard as an example.
Why would I use Standard?
The Standard's fun.
Okay, we have a 10-3, because I want a 10-3. I'm going to continue to ignore any form. Sir, we have a 10-4. We have a Yargle with +1/+1 trample.
I love how you're like, we're not playing Standard Yargle.
Okay, anyways, so we have a 10 power and 4 toughness creature. And you attack, and your opponent blocks with a 1 attack and 1 power creature. So the damage will be done at the same time. Each creature, the 1 power and 1 toughness will deal 1 damage to the Yargle. The Yargle will deal 10 damage to that creature. If the Yargle has trample, however, it only has to deal as much damage that would kill that creature. So, since the creature only has 1 toughness, the Yargle, with its 10 power, deals 1 damage to the creature, and the extra 9 would go to the player.
I think the best way to imagine it is essentially, in normal combat, it's like two people like blocking each other, let's say in football or let's say in wrestling. They come up, they meet, regardless of size or differences, for the most part, they'll usually balance each other out at some point, so everything stops there. And Trample, on the other hand, is essentially someone falling over past them or pushing them onto the ground and getting past anyway. So, most situations, people butt heads. Doesn't matter if it's a ridiculous amount of damage to a little thing. It stops there most of the time. Trample gets to say, you killed that thing, keep going right towards that person you're aiming at. You just keep overrunning. Mm-hmm. The opposite of that is essentially Death Touch. Death Touch says instead of having to worry about having more power, it's just about if it deals any damage, it gets to kill a thing. It's like having, let's just say the sweet kiss of death, like in Family Guy, where Death just gets to go up, taps the thing, on accident, dead. Or pushing up daisies. A single point of damage from that thing is lethal. It has the most severe form of plague you can imagine. It is deadly on every single bite.
However, in combat, you only have to block that creature with 1 creature. Because if it deals all 5 damage to a single creature, that creature's going to die regardless because of the Death Touch. Granted, there's always exceptions to literally everything, but most likely it will die regardless. Then, if you get into the interesting Trample Death Touch, which is a classic combo,
you go ahead and say, I'm going to attack with this. They say, I'm going to block with this. And then you say, I'm going to assign enough damage to kill that thing, which is 1.
Because Death Touch, as it states, if it deals damage to a creature, it dies.
It is lethal.
So, the technical lethal
is 1.
Is 1. Which is pretty bizarre.
It means every creature that's thrown under a Death Touch Trample only eats 1 point of damage, no matter how big and strong your guy is. Which is stupid, and one of the most fun things you can do to just throw someone I've got all these abilities on it. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna flunge. I'm gonna throw everything at once. Whatever sticks. You're probably gonna die.
It really hurts. It is a good finisher, but there isn't. I don't know if there's any printed with Death Touch and Trample. I'm sure there are, but I don't know any off the top of my head.
I could probably double check this.
They'd be rather powerful if they were.
Well, if you want to keep doing that, I'll double check card database real quick, just see if there's anything.
I just want to touch a couple of base mechanics in each, so we'll keep going in Magic for one or two more keywords, I think, and then we'll.
Let's see. The next two that would make the most amount of sense would be like Haste and Vigilance, I guess, because they're very simple.
Sure.
Haste just means if it would tap, if it would attack, if it would do anything. It's fine. It's fine. I think that might have been for that.
Yeah.
So basically, Haste just says it can do what it needs to. Normally things when they come in, they're disoriented from being summoned out of thin air. They're summoning sick. They don't know what they're doing. You can use them, they can't attack, they can't tap. They're confused. Haste, on the other hand, basically says, hey, they're ready to go as soon as you got them. They're ready to fight. They're ready to do what they need to do to get you where you need to go. Very simple. Very straightforward. Vigilance is simple in another way. Vigilance just says, if it would attack, instead of being committed to not doing anything else really, tapping down, not being able to block, not being able to use any other abilities, when it attacks, it gets to stay ready to do whatever it's doing. It's always keeping an eye out.
Yeah, I should have specified, when you declare an attack, you have to tap your attacking creatures, which is why Vigilance lets you keep it untapped when you attack.
Well, this is going to be one of those things where we're saying it now. There's more simple things that we should have gone through with Magic, but we could probably just... What I like to always show people, just because it's a fun video and it does touch all the bases, Explanation Point is a great video on how to play Magic the Gathering. Very fun, very simple, and it's just an enjoyable watch. It really is.
If we remember, put it in the description.
I'm going to spam you messages until you put it there.
I can't promise anything.
You better promise. Either way, we'll link it in the description. It's a fantastic video. It explains the basic stuff that I don't think we could, with the time that we want to spend on these videos, on these podcasts, and still be able to move on to other topics. Because as fun as Magic is, we don't want this to only be Magic. We want this to be something where we can do more than just that. So, moving on from there. Besides keywords, actually, do we want to finish up Vigilance?
I mean, I think we covered Vigilance. Like, Vigilance is a very simple keyword. If it would attack,
you don't tap it.
You don't tap it. It's just as simple as that.
It's always on guard, so it's able to block even if it attacked.
Yep.
Hence why it's named Vigilance. Let's move on then to what should be enough for Magic. Let's talk about what the resources in Magic. Because there's a few resources in the game that you have to manage. There's your life, there's your deck, and there's the most important thing, mana. Mana is fundamentally how you do what you do. You're a wizard, you're a planeswalker. You're a wizard, Aaron. So you're a planeswalker. You are someone who has the ability to manipulate mana to an extent where you can do these incredible things that get you into these fights with other planeswalkers. So what you do is you pull from the land the energy. So how mana works is normally the way you get mana in a straightforward, simple deck, no ramp, no nothing. You just play a land, the one land you get each turn, and that will let you produce one mana of whatever kind it is. So forest, mountain, plains, swamp, island, the 5 fundamentals, waste, which is a new one, which just lets you generate colorless and synergizes with certain cards. And there's a few other lands that, based on their flavor, based on what they represent, will let you tap for one of a choice or mix, or they help you to pull mana. So that's the basic idea. Now, the fun part is mana isn't only gotten from that. It is, since day one, things like Lotus effects.
Yeah.
Mana acceleration is one of the ways to get ahead of your opponent. So, unlike in Yu-Gi-Oh!, you don't really have a resource, you just have your board, and that's fundamentally your resource.
You have your card. The only resource in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is your board space and your cards, really. You can theoretically run out of your extra deck in, say, an XYZ deck, which I've done before, and then, if your opponent's just straight removal, it's like, okay.
Yeah. But
it's a very different game.
So for people who play Yu-Gi-Oh!, who play Pokemon, well, Pokemon has some resources, but it's different.
It is different.
But Magic, if you play Hearthstone, it's the same thing. Basically, you have a set amount of ways of getting mana out. There's ways that will make sense flavor-wise for saying, like, you perform this ritual, desperate ritual. So you're able to turn this one mana in through ceremony into more mana. Or petals. Lotus petals throughout the game. Lotus effects. Fundamentally, you have something that will either sack itself or will consistently produce mana.
Lotus, all referring to the infamous Black Lotus.
Not infamous. I wouldn't say infamous.
Maybe not infamous, but
the card of notoriety known as Black Lotus. For people who don't know Magic, just know it's one of the most expensive cards that has existed because of how broken it is, the story behind it, just the fact... I shouldn't say the story behind it, but the fact that it's one of the cards that's only seen 3 prints.
3 prints in the early sets, which means there's not a lot of them out there. A lot of them have been destroyed and everything, and that's a whole different story we don't want to get into right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just...
So while he is looking up that, we are looking up the Trample Death Touch to see if we can find any.
I don't think so, but
what we are going to cover is we're going to jump to Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, since we've talked about Magic. Do we actually have a hit? No. Anyways, I just want to cover some of the summons in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't really have keywords, much like Magic. It's very different, as we were talking about before. It's relying mostly on your summons and effects. Comparatively, well, in Magic, the keywords can be a large part of your deck. If you have a whole bunch of Death Touch things, that can run your entire deck. Flying is a very large one, especially in white and blue.
Yeah, because evasion is a good way to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
But Yu-Gi-Oh!, the resource you trade off and the keyword trade-off. So instead of having mana, you've got a limited board space. You only have 5 slots in the front, 5 slots in the back, and you've only got 5 spots for your big show cards, your creatures, or monsters in this case, get to live and do their thing, with the exception now of the Link Zone, which...
It's still only 5 spots.
It's five field zones. I shouldn't say field zone, because that's actually the name of it.
There is a field zone slot.
Yeah, I know. It's 5 monster zones. But you trade off being able to do some cool things with consistent keywords. In exchange, they basically built mechanics into the cards based on archetype. We talked about this in the first episode, I believe. So you have cards, part of a tribe of sorts, all do a similar effect, and that's what they do instead of having keywords. They just come up with an idea, make everything synergize around that, and go from there. So that's fun. The other thing, summoning.
Summoning is bizarre in Yu-Gi-Oh! Comparatively to most other games.
You get 1 normal summon per turn. You get to put out 1 creature fairly per turn. With the exception of cards that would state otherwise, like most card games do.
Yeah. So, like we said, there's exceptions to everything, but as he said, 1 fair summon. That's the key word right there. Not an actual keyword, but fair. Everything else is unfair and dumb.
And for a while, unhinged. It was great. I love that. That's when we played tournaments.
Ugh.
Special summons are the other type of summon. They're basically either things that are built into the game, like Xyz summoning, Synchro summoning, Fusion summoning.
You missed another basic summoning, tribute summoning.
Well,
which is technically like a normal summon, but it is a tribute summon.
it eats up your normal summon, and you basically trade off creature resources for a better creature.
Tribute summon, it's based on stars. Each creature has a star value. If
It's
you
a
have,
rarity, remember? Because it was based on the showing how rare the card was, and it made no sense. But yeah, it's level.
But basically, it's their levels. So levels 5 and 6 require 1 tribute summon.
7 and above.
7 and above require 2.
Unless you're a god card, then you need 3.
That says it on the card, though.
Yep.
So it didn't it used to be you required 3 for like above 10?
They did it in the show, but I don't think it was
only in the
actually
show?
built into the game.
I couldn't remember a time that it was any more than 2. However, usually you get more powerful creatures from those tribute summons. You do have to sacrifice your creatures that are already on board, though.
That's often a way to free up a slot, though.
It is. So, as we were saying, the board space in Yu-Gi-Oh! is very limited. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Being, I don't want to say degenerate, because that's not a good word for it, but it's not necessarily
it's
as interactive as Magic. There's a lot of counter spells. It's like, there's a lot of back and forth. Usually, not always, because
banter's the fun word.
Yeah,
for
banter.
It.
So like if you get decks like Tron and Boggles, not necessarily very interactive.
No, and it's by design because those are decks that want to interact as little as possible with your opponent unless it's killing them strategically.
Exactly, but you get to Yu-Gi-Oh! You get almost every deck is just non-interactive. You may have like one trap hole or bottomless trap hole, something like that, but
those are equivalent to having a force of will.
Yeah, those
are your singleton removers to their biggest threats, ready so that way you can go ahead and goldfish longer.
So Force of Will is a card in Magic the Gathering that you 2-for-1 yourself. It is a blue card that it's a counterspell, and you can pay its cost. It's either 2 blue and 3 colorless.
2 blue, 3 colorless.
Or you can exile a separate blue card in your hand, pay 1 life, and then cast it. That is its alternate casting cost, which is what it's used mostly for, because in the formats that it's allowed in,
it's to stop the unfair decks.
You usually don't get the 5 mana.
Unless you're Miracles.
No one cares about Miracles. But anyways, back to Yu-Gi-Oh! You get those singletons.
You have your
Solemn. So they're all allowed. You can have 3 cards in a deck, or 3 of the same card in a deck.
Yep.
Usually, that's at 1 spot. Your removal's at like 1 spot, even if there's 3 left. Depending of course.
What you usually do is you vary it, because the main thing about removal in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is it usually has qualifications to it. Bottomless, it has to have a certain attack.
The Dark Trap Hole has to be a special summon from the sideboard.
There's the Double Trap Hole, where if there's 2 things, like, what exactly was it? I remember they had to have certain setup. There's Solemns, which...
It's anything, basically.
It's anything, but it has a much higher trade-off for it because of that.
True, and in Yu-Gi-Oh!, you start with 8,000 life. It's a different point scale, but the creatures have thousands and hundreds of attack and defense.
And 50, because Gagagigo and Gagagigo are fun.
Well, there's like 25s, which
there's
are
25s. Why?
I'm pretty sure there are.
It's probably the old cards.
It is. But yeah, it's quite bizarre. And you start getting into it, and those cards, those specific removal cards that we're talking about, in most instances, not all, it's used to prevent your opponent from comboing before you can combo. In my experience, most games, not all, like my pet deck, which we'll get to in a bit, is not necessarily a combo deck. It has good synergy, but it's not a combo deck. So there's decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! That have good synergy, combo decks, and like a mini combo, but it's just bad. Like it's fun, but
you say that, but
in realistic, there is combo decks and high synergy decks, and that is it. Everything else is basically just brews that are for fun that most of the time Super Jank don't win. Am I wrong?
I'm looking up, like, I'm thinking of all the decks I've played, and I'm trying to think, like, was there anything that broke them all? Because it usually comes down to archetype, type decks, combo decks, is essentially what it is. Because the archetypes are usually the high synergy along with the type decks.
Yep.
And then there's decks like Exodia, where you just keep going until you win.
I guess Exodia isn't
Exodia is its own category.
Yeah, so Exodia is there's 5 pieces of Exodia.
Anyone who's seen the show, you basically get all of his pieces, and that frees him from his bindings. You win the game. You know, I'm trying to think about, is Exodia really that powerful now that we look at like where things have gone? There's fucking Quasar Dragons and all that, and Exodia is still like.
I mean, he's still the big bad baddie who, if you get the perfect hand, you just win.
Or if you see through your cards like like a real genius, at all times assembling Exodia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so back to the resource. Once you get into those, so synergy decks usually don't. I'm not going to say they don't have this problem, but it's less prominent. Is the board space. When you get into a combo deck, your board space is ridiculously important, and if you take it up with a creature you don't necessarily need for your combo, in your combo deck...
You could fizzle.
You can fizzle and fail, and then your opponent's going to remove your important pieces, and you die.
Let's see, let's say that I'm playing, you're playing Skull Servant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing, Bujin. Now, I assembled my board state, but I did it wrong somehow. I don't know how I would have done it, just because there's enough synergy, but let's say I got to a point where I can't exceed.
But you're talking about 2 synergy decks. Bujin is 100% a synergy deck.
I know, but the point remains, it's one of those decks where you can set up one of your control cards, one of your big guys, to try and keep things in check. And then you ran out of space for the other cards that you need, because I exceeds for, let's say,
101.
101. And that ate up room, it ate up creatures that would have gone to my normal payoff, like Amaterasu or Susanoo. So it sucks, but that's how it goes. And then you've got 2 8,000s with a card ready to go, like a Raigeki, and I'm dead because I didn't assemble correctly. Okay, let me make sure I've actually got the list pulled up, because we started rambling after.
Yeah, we're trying to not ramble as much this week. Not
That's
necessarily
not
doing the best job, but we're trying our best. So we'll just go straight into our pet decks, since we've covered some of the topics. Start with Magic. What is your favorite Magic deck, regardless of format?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, if we're going like, I love this deck regardless of how bad it is, you know it's Mill.
See, I've never seen you play Mill, though. Okay, you played... I take that back. I've seen you play it online. I've seen you archive trap Justin twice, and he got super tilted. So for those of you who don't know...
Mill, I'll say it this way. What makes Mill work, and what also makes it fail, is the fact that it tries to hit a resource that sometimes hitting it gives them fuel. So you try to take their deck from being 60 cards to being 0 cards. That is your goal. That is your strategy. And there's a lot of decks that naturally foil that on their own. But there's still a lot of cards that were made for this. And I love it because of that. It is 2 colors in almost every version. There's Esper at times, but it's 2 colors, so it's not hard to consistently have the mana you need. Resources are easy enough to do. There's 3 cards I love to death. Glimpse the Unthinkable. 2 mana mill 10. Very good card.
It's only 1/6 of the deck.
Archive Trap. Punish people for doing the thing that they're expected to do, which is to selectively find a card that they need.
Okay, a little insight on this Archive Trap. If your opponent searches their library...
If an opponent searches...
If an opponent... Let's make this clear. If an opponent searches their library, it's mill 13, I believe?
Mill 13.
Target opponent mills 13. Note, it does not have to be the same opponent. Otherwise, its usual casting cost is 2 blue and 3 colorless, which is quite a lot to mill 13.
But it's instant, so it's not like.
But it is an instant, so you can cast it whenever. But the trap part's great because in most of the formats that you played in Modern, people search their libraries.
You
all
played
the
as
time.
a gotcha.
It's like, hey, I gotcha, son.
Best opening hand. 2 lands, 3 archives, and 2 glimpse. Just ready to go. If they turn 1 search, 39 cards, you're ready to go.
All right, so I want to go into this specific card a little bit deeper because
we'll go to the board state we were in. So we were playing 3-person Modern, which is a terrible idea, but it's fun online because you don't really have to think about the complicated things until they pop up. And you don't have to weirdly shuffle cards just because everything's electronic. So, we're playing. Lucas searched his library. I forget why you did it, like if it was a land or if it was something else.
I think I was playing mono white, and you didn't want to mill me because I was playing mono white Panamaria, which if things go in my graveyard, I can get them back.
I'm pretty sure you searched, though.
I did, because I believe you guys had more lands than I did.
Yep. Oh, so you searched. I already milled you. No, I hit you with glimpse, remember?
Yeah, he
I milled
me
you for 10. You searched. I decided to punish Justin for it and milled him for half his deck.
Yeah, so what happened is I played a card that since my opponents had more lands than I did, I get to search up a basic land, put on the battlefield.
White Orchid. Good card.
Alec is like, hey, I milled you 10. I'm gonna mill Justin.
For 13.
And then Justin's like, whoa, what a dick. How dare you do that? Alec's like, oh yeah? Alright, I'll mill you another 10. Or I'll mill you another 13. How do you like them apples? And it was fantastic.
One of my favorite plays. Punishing the person who didn't use resources effectively.
Justin, if you listen to this, I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry. That was hilarious. Anyways,
that was a good time.
What was your third card?
Mind Funeral.
Yeah.
You just keep going until you hit 4 lands. In a normal deck, that's fine. In a deck that you've already hit with mill spells, it's tragic.
Yeah, you can get milled out pretty easily with that if you've already been hit with just a few mill spells.
It's 4 mana for 4 lands, essentially. But you take everything in between with it.
And you can get really lucky. You can be like, oh, yep, I'm just going to keep going. Oh, you only have lands left in your deck now? Because I milled literally all of your spells? That's unfortunate.
The best part, they went back to the card. They went back to the drawing boards for Return to Ravnica, and they're like, man, this card, people loved it. I'm not sure if it was in Standard that they loved it, but they appreciated it enough because they made Mindcrank, which is the steroid version of it. If you pay the same amount of mana as you would have for a Mind Funeral, I think it does the same thing. Let me actually double check. No, what is it? Not Mindcrank. What is it now?
I have no idea.
Maybe it's faster if I just search for Return to Ravnica block.
Are you talking about an artifact?
No. I'm talking about the card that has like the wavy lines and the dude who's like grabbing onto his skull.
Oh.
How about you move on to your pet deck while I go ahead and revisit?
Anyways, yeah, my pet deck is a commander deck, so it is 100 cards, including the commander, and this will not be a surprise for those of you who played with me. It is Progenitus. For those of you who don't know, commander, you have to have a legendary creature as your commander. that you can cast throughout the game. Oh, it's Mind Grind.
Yep, Mind Grind. Each opponent too. It's the steroid version. And they reveal X until they reveal X lands.
So the cast, it is a sorcery though. So the casting cost is a blue, a black, and X.
But you hit everyone.
And you hit X lands. X cannot be 0, however.
Yeah,
so you
because
can't
how do you reveal until you hit 0?
That's a good point. Anyways, my pet deck is Progenitus. Progenitus is a legendary creature.
You never cast him.
I do!
You rarely cast him.
Because there's so many other fun cards in the deck. And if I do cast him, he gets board wiped and he goes up to 12 mana. Every time. So...
No, he goes up to 7.
Okay, we'll get to that later. Anyways, Progenitus is 2 of every basic color, which makes him a total of 10 mana, which
He's a
is
fair and balanced Magic card.
which is a lot. And the only thing, he's a 10/10.
10/10 for 10.
And that's balanced. And then the only other text in the card, besides his what's the word for it? The special text at the bottom that doesn't do anything.
Oh, flavor?
Flavor text, thank you.
I'll have to remove
The
that.
soul of the world has returned. It says protection from everything. Which, protection from everything means can't be targeted, can't be dealt damage,
Can't be blocked.
can't be blocked.
Because you can't assign blockers to him.
You just can't, because in everything, you have to
You
target.
do not get to interact with him in a way that's meaningful unless you do it by interacting with everything. So...
Yeah. So you would think he'd have protection from literally everything, but he doesn't. He still dies to any AoE board wipe. That is not damage based. If it has to say destroy or exile or something.
Yep.
But if it's damage based, it doesn't work. -1/-1 works. Again, it has to be AoE and non-targeting. Anything that makes you sacrifice or target player sacrifice also works.
Celestial Flare got ya.
Because you can target the player, you can't target Progenitus. Also, I cannot target Progenitus, which is
unfortunate
because
but then you Crater Hoof and
I
things are fine.
don't run Crater Hoof in that deck. It's not good enough. That's not true. I don't have enough creatures to make it good. But anyways, I run some swords. So there's some swords that give protection from different colors.
It was a cycle of cards.
Yeah, it's a cycle. They're very good, especially in Commander.
Especially Sword of Body of Mine. You get a wolf.
I get a 2/2 wolf? Oh
And you
my
mill
God.
people? I love it.
I'm milling their 100-card decks. Yes!
until they have a shuffle.
How much does it even mill them for?
I think it's 12.
Oh no.
It's a 10th of your deck. And Miracle Vasu's coming at you, so you're going to have to do a Mind Funeral.
I have 3 Titans in my deck.
I need that black spell.
Titans shuffle, by the way. Well, one of them shuffles all of it. One of them shuffles itself.
What I need is that card that lets you search for X cards to exile from the game.
Yeah.
But then you just let Progenitus die at some point, and then he shuffles. And then he's
Yeah,
in your
that's
deck.
true.
But then you just put him in your deck.
Yeah. Anyways, Progenitus, very fun, hard to interact with for both you and your opponent. It does take 3 hits with Progenitus, which, for 10 mana, it seems like a lot. Granted, if you can keep it on the battlefield for that long,
You just need an Anthem.
yeah, you just need an Anthem and it'll be alright. But Anthem is giving
You need a
an
broadcast
AoE
effect.
Yeah, AoE of giving creatures plus in power, or toughness. So basically, that is that. One of the other cards that combos very well. It's called Fist of Suns.
You basically go ahead and you commit to having a multicolored deck in exchange for lowering the cost of cards. So you have 1 mana of every type to cast any single spell you want.
Yeah, it is a 3-mana artifact that says you can pay 1 of each color instead of paying a spell's mana cost, which is very convenient that it doesn't say from your hand. It says that you're casting.
It's a replacement cost.
It is a replacement cost. So in this deck, there's just a ton of things that cost a ton of mana. Granted, the deck can get there eventually.
Yeah,
but
you're playing an 11 mana spell on turn 6 or so.
But I have played Progenitus on turn 4, which is amazing. Having a 10/10 protection on turn 4.
I forgot, what was the math? Like turn 3
You could turn 3 it.
Is the soonest with your deck at the moment?
Yeah, with my current deck, you could theoretically run turn 3. I run a lot of Mana Rocks, so I run 10 Signets, all of them that you can possibly run. There's a lot of ramp in the deck, and it's just a really fun deck.
Alright, now, I know that you can probably see the order that I have here for Yu-Gi-Oh's pet deck list.
Do we even need to talk about the last one? I don't know it that well. I do not know that deck that well. I kind of know it.
Well, I want to at least talk about it a bit just because Paul's maining it right now.
Hi, Paul.
Whoa. Talking about tunes.
Probably doesn't even listen to our podcast. Anyways, we'll move on to our Yu-Gi-Oh deck since, again, both me and Alec here have played a decent amount of Yu-Gi-Oh, I'd say.
Yeah.
We'll start with mine. As I discussed before, my favorite deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Skull Servants.
It is probably one of the most fair broken decks there is.
Oh, I love it so much. So basically, how it works is King of Skull Servants, as we discussed, I believe, on the previous podcast, gains 1,000 attack for every Skull Servant in your graveyard.
Yep, and how the archetype works is every single servant, every single Skull Servant, White Knight,
White Mare.
White Mare, what is it, Lady of Skull Servants?
Lady in White.
Lady in White.
White Prince. There's a new one. It's like White Princess or something like that. All these, which you can run 3 of each, and the King itself, by the way.
All say that their name is treated as King of Skull.
No,
not
treated
King,
as Skull Servant
Servant.
in the graveyard. So, and your setup is, if you get a White Prince into grave from anywhere, his effect says, when this enters the grave, you can send a Lady in White and a Skull Servant from your deck and or hand to the graveyard.
You basically bring his parents along.
Jeez.
Have you never thought of it that way?
No, I haven't.
It doesn't matter. They're undeads. That's not really death for them.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And
they're going for a walk. It's fine.
And
he's got his
then,
little dog.
then anyways, at that point, when you have those 3, you can normal summon your King of Skull Servants. There's a few ways to get the King of Skull Servants out.
You either cheat him out by banishing or exiling, whatever terminology you prefer to use, with the correct one for the game being banish. Banish the 2 Skull Servants. Usually,
It's specifically White Prince's secondary effect that he is referring to. You banish White Prince, and then you banish 2 Skull Servants or Lady in Whites from your graveyard to special summon a King of Skull Servants from your deck.
So you take him, you lower him into your grave somehow, he brings along the 2 people, brings along his parents, and then his parents get out the big baddie.
Unfortunately, if you only have the White Prince and the cards it sent, and you use this, when you bring out the King of Skull Servants, it will be a 0/0 and die.
No?
Okay, well,
Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have save
it's not. It's technically useless, I should say.
And then...
So, what I mean by die is your opponent's just going to attack it and kill it next turn.
Yeah, but that's when you lure him into a trap and you use a trap... You use something to load your grave up as Chainlink 2.
It doesn't run any instantaneous things, really. It runs a Mystical Space Typhoon, I believe. And that's about it. 1-for-1 is an instant, right? That's only main phase, I believe. It's been a while since I piloted the deck. But 1-for-1 is... pretty sure that's just main phase. We're double checking. Yeah, it's just main phase.
Yeah.
So there's no instantaneous interaction in the deck, with the exception of a Mystical Space Typhoon, which only destroys spell traps, unfortunately. So, but yeah, that's my deck. I load the grave up with quote-unquote Skull Servants and beat my opponent in the face as fast as possible.
Again, one of the most unfair decks there is, because you have sometimes upwards of 20,000 damage on board. But it's all very fair. It really is. There's no broken combo. You just do a synergy that's easy enough to interact with, but most people don't have it when they need it.
Exactly.
And in the same vein, Bujin. Bujin only has like 4 unfair things to do, and they revolve around doubling attack. And that's Crane, and that's Honest, and I feel like there's another way to really increase the attack, but
Honest isn't necessarily just a Bujin thing, though. Honest is like, if you're running a light-based deck, you run Honest.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Usually. In most cases.
But, yeah, Bujin it was a similar idea. You load your grave up, you play a few select cards to actually have on board, and how Bujins worked was essentially they were these suits of armor that had spirits to them, and those were the ones that were humanoid. Then there was the Bujingi, which were essentially the weapons, the shields. They were all the other aspects of, I think the best way of describing it is that it was warrior, it was all their stuff. So all the weapons, all the animals did something when they were in grave. Or you'd pitch them to grave to do their thing. So you'd load up your grave, you'd play your 1 or 2 creatures in that turn, and you would just continuously interact with your opponent, or when you weren't interacting, doing something like an Honest to make your swings really matter. But it was a fun deck because it was control in a format that isn't used to control decks. So it's like, hey, I want to attack. Turtle, I don't think you really wanted to do that. It was fun. It was spiteful in all the right ways while still being a relatively fair deck, which is why it was only like tier 3.
Yeah. I still enjoyed playing Skull Servants into it, because since it was very attack-based and not heavy removal... So Skull Servants lose the heavy removal, and since their removal was mostly attack-based, not completely, but mostly, one of King of Skull Servants' effect is if it dies in battle, you can exile quote-unquote Skull Servant from your graveyard and bring it back.
I killed your thing! He is back, but weaker!
Only by 1,000, but he's back and ready to rumble.
By a factor of 1/8. No! Those decks were great. Then there's Toons, which Paul currently has assembled. It was a pet deck just because he had the spell cards and all that he really enjoyed, like Toon World and that, and the fact that he kept getting the cards before they spiked kind of helped.
Yeah, he got pretty lucky with that.
Toons is a very simple deck. They're powerful cards with a caveat to them. That is, if you lose your Toon World, they die. Because basically the idea was you open the book, you read the stories, you have the tunes. If the book closes, goes away, they die. It's very nice. I like the flavor that Yu-Gi-Oh has. That's one of the main things that draws people to it. It's great. But unfortunately, I don't know much about tunes besides that, because everything's basically around being able to tutor or search for whatever you need when you need it. Playing a good attacker, like the Gemini Elves or the Toon Mask that copies.
And as he was saying, this is a very thematic deck. So you're telling stories about cards that are already in the game. Like,
yep,
for example, there's Toon Gemini Elves,
which is it's the storybook version of Gemini Elves,
which is, it's all very interesting, and like they have their own effects. Like some, I believe most of them can attack directly. Not all of them, but a lot of them can attack directly. I believe Toon Sorcerer does something if it hits. Can't quite recall. We might bring Paul on here if he's willing at some point. He will describe it
live here first.
In intimate detail. I'm sure. So,
well, the only other card game that has been played a decent amount in this group now, me and Paul with Pokemon, although he's not here to talk about Star Quaza, his Delta deck, and Similarly, it's been a while since I played. The only real tournament deck I got real good play out of was the Team Plasma deck. Team Plasma deck was based around like 3 cards, but it was essentially a Lugia EX deck. The goal was to kill something with Lugia EX, because then instead of drawing 1 out of 6 cards to win the game, you drew 2 out of 6.
Mm.
And there's a couple of other synergies that you do, but the deck was essentially a Lugia EX deck. It was fun, it was great. You had a resource, Team Plasma, normal energy. Lugia, you would have to get rid of the energy in order to do that attack, and you'd have to actually have enough on it. You'd use, trying to remember now. Do you remember the Pokemon that's the Thundercloud? Thundurus, I think.
Sure. I don't know.
Thundurus EX. He gets to take an energy from the discard, put it onto something. So you Lugia EX continuously, and when you run out of energy, you just go ahead and take Thundurus and load it back on. Very simple.
Yeah,
very fun.
I have played the card game of Pokemon, I think exactly once, and I think that was 6 or 7 years ago.
Did you win?
I have no idea.
I like to think you did, but most likely not.
I think I did. I think it was with your deck. A deck against Max.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I don't remember what happened. I do have a lot of Pokemon cards from when I was a child. Never used to play. I just like collecting them.
That's one of the highlights of Pokemon. Is just you played, even if you didn't play the card game, you probably played the video game, and that still made collecting the cards fun.
Mm-hmm. I did indeed. Anyways, we'll move to our third and final topic.
Love Letter.
Love Letter. It is a fantastic card game.
So, why don't we review just the basic rules? So the idea is you shuffle the deck. There's 16 cards. You remove the top card of the deck. That one's stored away as, what is it, a burn card, I think it is?
It's a burn card that is face down, so no one knows what it is.
So what that does is you have a certain amount of known cards. Just because there's a cheat sheet that tells you how many of each thing is in the deck. It also says on the card itself, using stars, I believe, is how they do it. Yep, stars. And it's a deck about knowing what's in people's hand regardless of what they tell you. Because if you know that, you can plot to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
So you shuffle the deck, you take away the burn card, which lets the game be randomized and help to make it where even if you got down to the last cards, it's still like a 50-50 chance of if someone will lose if you try to do a play. Taking turn, draw a top card, choose a card to discard and do an action most of the time with.
So you have to take an action. So what you missed is at the start of the game, after you do the burn card, each player starts off with one card in hand. When it's the start of your turn, you draw one card off the draw pile, and you have 2 cards in hand. You have to play one of them. So are you dealing them up right now?
We can do like a pseudo game to kind of explain cards.
Sure, but I'd like to go through the cards first.
Yeah.
So basically, after you play it, and you keep playing in a circle, clockwise, until you get to the last card,
or until everyone's dead.
Or everyone besides one person is eliminated.
Yep.
So once you get to the last card, or once the last card is played, so the last person draws the last card, they play one of their 2. Whoever's left in the round reveals their cards, and whoever's the highest number on their card wins the game.
Yep.
So the highest card
I think we should build up rather than top down.
Sure.
Because knowing about that top card is probably more important once you know how all the other cards work.
Sure.
So let's start with the guard. Lowest point total. There are 5 of it in the stack. It is worth 1 point, and what you do is you would name any card outside of guard, and you'd pick someone. So in this case, if it's me and Lucas playing, we've only got 2 people here. He's the only person I can target. He's the only person I'm trying to win against. So I've got a guard in my hand. I actually do after dealing out. So I would say, hey, Lucas, I think you've got... We'll say I think you've got the Baron. He goes ahead and just tells me yes or no, does he have the Baron? If he doesn't, he gets to keep the card in his hand. If I'm right, he discards it. So, essentially, if I guess this card right, he's out of this round.
Yeah, I discard the card and out of the round. That's the important part. It's not you just discard and then you move on. That person is out. That's why guards can be extremely useful.
Yep, as soon as someone doesn't have any cards in hand at the end of a turn, they're out. So, if you want to explain the next person, Priest.
So the next one is the Priest. It has a point value of 2. There are 2 in the deck, and what you do is you look at a hand. Note, it can be any hand, including your own, which is technically a play. Usually you want to look at an opponent's hand, but since you do have to play a card every turn, there will be some instances. We'll get into those in about 2 cards, because that leads to some interaction, or I should say lack of interaction, due to that specific card. But looking at the card, your opponent's hand gives you information. If you have a Priest and a guard, you can look at their hand, and they either have to get rid of it or do something to kill you or remove it from the game so you don't kill them first.
Yep. Baron. So, what you do is with a Baron, you show each other your hand. I think it actually says to show. Let me just...
you compare hands.
Yep, secretly compare hands. So you actually reveal the cards to each other.
Yep, no one else on the table, just the 2 target players. So yourself and the person you target.
Whoever has the highest total points on that card wins the comparing. Whoever loses discards. So, if I drew a card, I had Baron, I play Baron, I say, Lucas, let's take a look. He has something higher than the card I just drew. Like, I had Guard, he had the Priest. I lost, I have to discard, I no longer have cards in hand, I'm dead.
I will say, one of the most vicious things, courtesy of Max Papadopoulos, by the way, is to Baron Priest someone turn 1. So, you draw Baron, and you have a Priest in your hand. Instead of playing the Priest, you play the Baron and target someone, because the only way that you win is if they have a guard. And it's just vicious, and it gets people so many times, and it just hurts.
Because you punish them for having the most plentiful card. But the best part is, let's say it's just me and you. There are 14 cards here. 13 once I... No, it would be 13, 12. So you have a 6 in 12 chance of winning that fight. And if you don't, that's on you. It's a 50-50. But it gets worse as there's more people, because there's a higher likelihood that you're not going to pick someone with a guard.
Mm-hmm. And also there's the classic power move of Baron guarding, which means you can't actually win, but if the numbers on the cards are the same, it's a tie and no one discards. So the only way you don't immediately die is if they also have a guard, and it's like, well played.
And if they have a guard, they know not to target you and you know not to target them.
It's pretty interesting. It doesn't always work out.
Oh no.
From previous experiences.
Handmade.
Anyways, the card I was referring to before that leads to a lack of interaction is number 4 on our list. 4-point value. There's 2 in the deck. Handmaiden. This is when you play it, you gain protection until your next turn.
Basically, no one can do anything that says that you would have to pick a person. So, Let's say there's 3 people. And you went ahead and you did Handmaid. That other person, like after you, let's say that they had something like a guard, like they priested you. Then they're like, I've got the guard, I've got this. They Handmaiden. Now, you either have to draw something better than a guard, or guard someone without any information. Or you have a Baron. You have to Baron someone without any information. So basically, you usually use it when you get it, because it's fundamentally good. You never want to go without it.
And it gets really interesting when you get down to 2 players. Because if you Handmaiden, your opponent can only target themselves. Which, you get into a guard, you just play it, and you can't actually guess yourself. So that gets discarded. The Priest, you can technically look at your own hand. The Baron gets discarded because nothing happens. We'll get into what these do later, but the Prince, again, they can only target themselves. The King gets discarded. The Countess doesn't do anything, and, well, the Princess, if you discard that, you lose. Which, you can, so, we'll get in that later.
Yeah, we'll just keep moving. Prince, next highest point value, 5, 2 of in the deck. One player discards his or her hand, and then will draw that same amount.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically just replace the cards in their hand. So the main idea of it is if they have the Princess, you trigger a loss for them. If they don't, you're just spinning the deck to try and get to the end of the game faster. And it interacts with another card, but we'll move on to the next one. King.
The next card is the King. That is a 6-point value, and there is one of in the deck. This is an extremely risky card to play. So it's a high point value, and there's only one of. So if someone barons with you, it's a high point value.
You're likely to win.
You're likely to win, but you're also likely to make it easy to target by the other players when that person who baroned you die. It's like, oh, they had a handmaid or a prince in hand. If they had a prince, you can only have 3 cards in hand, all of which are one-ofs. So it makes you a big target, but its utility is very useful in the late game, but in the early game, not necessarily. So what it does is you trade hands. You, the person who plays the king, and a target player trade hands. So it's quite questionable if you have the king and a non-guard card in hand, because if you trade your, say, like, it can be a good play, but if you trade away a guard, it's very bad for you. Not necessarily. If you get a guard back, it's not that bad. But if you have a king and a guard, and you decide to play the king, you're basically telling them, if they don't have a guard in their hand that they're giving to you, they're going to name the card you got from them, and you lose.
Yep.
And it's just, like, it can work the reverse way, where if you think they have a guard in hand, and you have, like, a priest, you can try and trade it, but there's a good chance they're going to offload the card before you get a chance.
Yeah, because they get an entire turn cycle, you don't.
If you trade in the princess, which we'll get to later, it gets a little bit more better for you if it's mid-game. If it's late game, you definitely don't want to do that. Late game, you can trade hands to hopefully get a higher value card, which the Countess and the Princess are the only point values higher than the King. So, and we'll go on to the Countess.
So, Countess, essentially, the idea is concubine kind of thing. If she is caught with the king or the prince, she goes away. Now, what that means literally is if you draw her while you have one of those two, or if you had her and drew one of those two, she goes away. The meta play that you can do is just choose to discard her as opposed to use your other card, because then people will think that you have a high point value card, which means that they won't baron you, or means that they will try to guess with a guard what you have, which would be a 50-50 in most cases, unless you just played that one, you just discarded her just cause.
Mm-hmm. And it's quite interesting. It's not as dynamic as the princess card, but it is very interesting. It's like he was saying, the mind games can be very high. Because personally, I'm one who likes to hold on to that card, but I will play it randomly. I'll just play it now, and everyone's like, "Oh, you like to hold on to that card usually? You got a prince or a king?" And I was like, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Anyways, the final card is the princess.
She does nothing.
She does something. But anyways, the countess is a 7-point value, and the highest point value is the princess at 8. Also one of, and so you have to play a card per turn, right? And you can play the princess, which is not a good play. It's a power play. It's definitely a power play. If you discard the princess, you lose the game. So if you play a card, you have to discard it, or it counts as discarding. So you lose the game if you play the princess. So this is the card that's going to sit in your hand the entire game, which it gets. There's so many different scenarios that are just amazing. So you get down to 2 people. This is a scenario that I've gone into, and it's very fun. So you get into the scenario. One person is a princess. You have whatever. You handmaiden. They draw a prince. No, they have to play one of their cards. If the princess is discarded at all, they lose. They can either play the princess and lose, or they can play the prince
and lose.
If they play the prince, they have to target a player. They can't target you since you've handmaidened. They target themselves, discard the princess, and lose. It's really interesting what you can get into, and it's really fun.
Her entire purpose is to kill people.
Pretty much.
All right. So I think that's enough where we can just walk through. I think we could walk through a quick game.
We'll walk through a quick game. Oh, also, when you win a round, so
you get a point.
You get a cube, a little red cube that is your love letter to that person, to the princess. And once you get a certain amount of cubes, you win. I believe it's based is it 4? Sorry, they're called tokens of affection. My bad. They're not just called little cubes, as much as I'd like them to be called little cubes.
If only these were. Why couldn't these be parallelograms?
Parallelograms. But
Parallelograms.
It depends on the number of players. If you have 2 players, you require 7. 3 players, 5, and 4 players, 4. So it is a maximum of 4 players. What I've done, and I will make a note, this is the base level. There is an advanced, I believe it's called advanced, I'm not sure off the top of my head, love letter game that they update a whole bunch of cards, added more cards. It's for a larger player audience. I've looked into it. It doesn't seem as fun to me. Because like some of the things they've changed, some of the things they've added, just not
don't balance
as fun. So if you want to play this game with a larger group than 4 people, I take 2 separate decks and mix them together.
I'm assuming you just take out the second princess.
No, it gets.
You play with 2 princesses.
You play with 2 princesses and you still only burn 1 card, and it gets pretty crazy pretty quickly.
Okay.
But anyways, we're going to play a mock game. Alec has kindly dealt this out. We'll say he goes first since he dealt.
Okay, so I've got a guard. I'm going to draw my card. I take a look. Ooh, that's a good card. Now, I've got 2 options. I can either play the card I just drew or guard. I'm going to choose to guard.
How dynamic.
So, do you have the princess?
I do not have the princess. The person who was gonna podcast with us today, Ben, that is his classic move, name princess on turn 1. It's gotten me more times than I'd like to say. Like, there's a good chance you'll have the princess because like it's not a high card deck, but
yeah, the probabilities aren't that small for you to have it.
But it always feels bad when you get out before you even get a turn. But anyways, I'm going to draw my card.
Oh, by the way, I have a handmaiden. I'll say it because it doesn't help to paint the picture unless I try and... One of us has to have our hands revealed, basically.
Yeah, you don't get to see my hand. I'm going to play a guard out of my hand.
Are you going to say what I think you're going to say, or are you going to be a piece of shit?
I usually guess prince. Actually, that's not true. I do usually guess handmaiden, but for this instance, to play a little bit more, I will name prince. Because if you name handmaiden, they can't handmaiden and protect themselves.
Because you can only play the cards on your turn.
And since I only have a limited amount of information at this point, getting a handmaiden so I can interact with them is the best. If they don't have it, that means I can interact with them next turn, unless they draw another handmaiden, or draw a handmaiden, which
basically, all we know besides the card in your hand is that there's 3 guards and everything else.
And then with my mystery card in hand, I will pass the turn.
So I'm gonna draw a card. Oh, that's a fun and dynamic. Drew a card. I don't think it's worth it to try and guess again. I think I'll just protect myself, so I'd go with Handmaiden.
So now we have 2 mystery cards. Exciting gameplay. 2 mystery cards that you can't see. I'm going to draw my card for the turn. So, I have 2 options. Again, I can't target him. So I'm just going to play a priest and target myself and look at my own hand. And then I will pass the turn.
Draw my card.
Mystery card number 2 in his hand.
Okay. Shuffling your hand is also a very useful skill, so people don't see stagnant cards. That's another little thing.
It's just like
don't give people free information in
Yeah.
the game. That's all information is the basic
card
thing.
games are all information.
Okay, so I will guard. Let's see. We're down to 2 guards. We've got 1 handmaiden, 1 priest.
See, he's
2
counting
barons.
cards right now, which is fully acceptable in this game.
It's something you want to do. It's something so that way you can make an informed decision when you play your card.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna guess that you have... I'm gonna say you have the king.
I do not have the king. It is not my mystery card.
Darn
All
it.
you at home try and guess my mystery card while I draw my card. I'm going to play the 4th guard of the game,
Okay.
and I'm going to name Prince.
No. You're incorrect. I'll tell the audience. I have the princess.
Fuck you!
Okay, we'll go to my turn. Thank the Lord. Guard you.
Oh shit, that's the last one. What
You
do I
can't-
have?
You can't kill me with a guard.
Yeah, but I can kill you with the prince.
Do you have a prince?
I do not have a prince.
No, there's still a prince on board. I don't like this.
There's 2 princes on board, at least?
No, there's one.
There's 2 princes.
1 prince,
There's
1
2
king.
princes.
Isn't it 2
There's 2 princes in the deck, buddy.
Oh boy, that's not good
I
at
drew
all.
a card,
Is it a prince?
and I'm gonna play the Countess out of my hand. That was my mystery card, the Countess.
So, here's the thing. You either didn't have Countess last turn, or you did, and that makes all the difference. Because if you did have Countess, that means that you drew one of the 2 things that would be problematic for me. Well, one of them's not problematic. King doesn't really do much, but a prince kills me on board.
I mean, theoretically, if the King's the last card, I get to swap hands with you and win.
That's also valid. So
You just got a handmaiden. Just draw the other handmaiden. It's easy.
I drew the king.
Oh, you want to swap hands?
Okay.
There you go, bud.
That's the baron.
I drew a baron, so instead of fighting with my 7 into his known 8,
Okay, we're down to 4 cards in the bird.
alright, well, what do we got? I'm drawing.
It's a prince.
Alright, discard your hand. I
It's
drew
the
a prince. So I'm making him discard his hand. Just hope he doesn't draw the next prince, which is highly likely.
Okay, so now it's my turn because you dug me 2 cards
That's
deeper?
true. I dug him 2 cards deeper, but I didn't have a choice.
Okay.
So he either has the prince or not.
Okay, this is a power play here because
Is
I've
it
got the Baron he gave.
Baron?
I've got Baron Handmaid. Handmaid.
Oh, he handmade? That means I draw my last card, which is the prince, and I kill myself. So it's a power play. So this is the exact scenario I'm talking about before, where I cannot target him with my prince. Fuck you, priest, for being the burn card. Pardon my language.
You would have won.
I would have won if it wasn't the prince.
I love how it became a 50-50 win or lose.
And I'm gonna play the princess and lose the game.
Okay. So, just continuous guards with a 2-person scenario is fun, but not likely to get you a win.
Correct. You'll get lucky sometimes, but it's a very fun game, especially to play in group.
Yep.
So, and
I think with just an example of it, I might actually put the graphics up just. Like, I might see about it just to give us an idea. We still hit the hour 15, even though
we're really bad at this. Well, that's our show for the week. That's Casual Experts. Again, I'm Lucas.
And I'm Alec, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Have a good night.
All right.